I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about DACA, the Supreme Court and Justice Roberts, Uncle Tom's Juneteenth celebration, the Marxist BLM versus Black Lives Matter, and eBay, Silicon Valley sends spiders. And, of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again, and welcome to America Can We Talk, and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. We didn't get a chance to talk about it last week, but the Supreme Court ruled in a case challenging the legality of DACA, which is the program been in place since the Obama era. And very quickly remind you the background before I tell you how problematic this was. President Obama was asked during his presidency several times, could you please issue an executive order that would basically say that if people are in this country because their parents brought them illegally into America when these kids were minors, so these kids didn't really break the law themselves, their parents or whoever brought them here broke the law, could you please make an executive order to change the law and simply give these kids either citizenship or a path to citizenship? President Obama said in response to the many leftists urging this, which is essentially giving either citizenship or a path to citizenship to a large number of people who have no legal status in America, could you please do that for us? And he said, President Obama, the lawyer, said, the constitutional lawyer said, I don't have constitutional authority to do that. You'll have to get Congress to do that. He made that statement, and yet later in his second term decided, you know what, I'm tired of waiting for the process created by the Constitution to do what I want them to do. So President Obama issued his executive order that created DACA. And it's essentially a federal order that gives freezes in place the legal status of people falling into the category I described. People who are here because their parents or somebody else brought them into America illegally. So it gave them something other than a limbo status, a status toward which essentially protected their being here. Well, there's been many points, discussions along the way. In fact, we talked about in this show a couple of years ago. Really great proposals came out of the Republican majority House back when they had the majority, when they were saying, you know, if you do the following steps, you comply with these things, you can have a path toward citizenship. Another one was you can have a path toward a permanent legal status. And so that was the bill that I was really supporting. There was a bill the Republicans had essentially saying, you know what, if you're here illegally, but you didn't cross the border yourself, you really came here because your parent or someone else brought you here, we'll give you this permanent status. You have to come forward. You have to say who you are. You have a certain window of time to identify yourself. And if you meet these criteria, you haven't committed a crime. You know you're not. You haven't gotten in trouble. That you can be in this status, and you can continue in this status by coming back each year and checking in. It was not a path to citizenship. It was also protection against being deported. If you were to come to the attention of the immigration service. So it was a protection that you wouldn't get kicked out, but you couldn't get to citizenship, but you get to a legal permanent status. That was not enough for the Democrats, not enough for them. They could not go with anything other than simply blanket immunity and blanket citizenship for all this group. So now we get around to the Supreme Court decision that came down this past week, the Supreme Court decision in DACA. And the gist of it, what I want to say about it is this. Any lawyer, any judge worth their salt can always find a way to dive into the law, to dive into the nuances of law, and find some basis to get to the decision they want to get to. I mean, it's a sad thing, but it's the same with lawyers. I mean, lawyers, you hear lawyers taking cases and you're thinking, that is ridiculous. You took a case in that circumstance, but lawyers, judges, sadly, can always find a way to wiggle themselves into what is flatly illogical, which is inconsistent with the law, but some argument that says, basically, oh yeah, here's what I think the law means. So now we have this case before the Supreme Court, essentially the Trump administration saying, you know what, DACA wasn't legal to start with. the Trump administration was amenable to many of the ideas that came out of Congress. They were open to different ideas, helping to get some more stable status for the DACA people here in America. Never could get to agreement. Democrats want nothing less than absolute citizenship. So eventually, President Trump said, okay, we, America, we're going to not perpetuate this illegal executive order that President Obama did. We're going to basically move forward and say we're going to end the DACA program because it has no basis in law. There's no law that Congress passed ever allowing this, in limbo status of DACA. And this is something Obama made up even after he acknowledged he had no right to do it. So if we can't get to agreement, you know what? We're just going to end DACA. So the case goes before the Supreme Court. And in the typically unreliable, as I've been calling Chief Justice Roberts, he's kind of like the John McCain of the Supreme Court now. It seems he revels in being the maverick. He revels in doing the opposite of what everyone assumes he will do. He revels in being unpredictable and being the center of attention. And everyone sits home and goes, oh my gosh, wonder what Justice Roberts is going to do. He's the swing vote. So Roberts went with the majority that refused to uphold the Trump administration's effort to end DACA, or put the other way, Roberts joined the majority that allowed DACA to stand as it is. Now, to be fair to Roberts, and this is why I was saying in the beginning about how, lawyers and judges can always think of some nuanced reason, some in-depth explanation for what they do, Justice Roberts didn't really say that DACA must remain forever. He didn't really say that the Obama administration was right in passing it. He didn't really say the Trump administration has no right to end it. He actually found that the particular procedure followed by the Trump administration violated the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act, essentially saying that that the Trump administration had the right to end DACA, but they didn't do it right. It's kind of like didn't dot your I's and cross your T's, didn't say Simon Says, didn't follow the right procedure. So it appears that Justice Roberts is open to the idea of having DACA end as long as the Trump administration follows more precisely, or in some particular, follows the Administrative Procedure Act. So on the one hand, on this decision, I will say there are leftists lamenting it because they realize what I just told you, that the court did not actually rule that DACA can remain forever and that the DACA people in America have an absolute right to stay here forever. They didn't rule that, but they did strike down the current effort by the Trump administration to undo the DACA plan, but very much left open the idea that if correct procedures follow, yes, indeed, President Trump could end the DACA program. But the larger point I wanted to make about this, and this is kind of my theme for the day. On Mondays, I almost never have a guest on Mondays on this show. I call it my Deep Dive Monday, and I like to dig into one or two topics more deeply. Part of the reason so many conservatives were extremely upset with Justice Roberts siding with the liberals, who, by the way, the four liberals in the Supreme Court, they never fail to be liberal. They never cross over and join the conservatives. They never cross over and say, maybe we should follow the Constitution this time. The liberals on the Supreme Court legislate from the bench. It's what they do. They are the don't follow the law, whatever I feel like doing faction of the Supreme Court. The four liberals simply do. They get to the legislative policy outcome they want, and they find a reason in law to justify it. The conservatives are supposed to be the ones actually following the Constitution, actually following the law. And so there's great angst on the conservative side because, yes, Justice Roberts left open the idea, yeah, we're going to get around, maybe if the Trump administration does this correctly, he could end the DACA program, the illegal DACA program. But the larger point is, in the Obama era, in the 8 years of the Obama era, the endless assault on the idea of America, the Obama administration, among many other things that were just so, just caused great distress among patriots and conservatives, is that there was just an underlying endless effort to weaken, eviscerate, destroy, dissolve, confuse the identity of America, the sovereignty of America, and the rule of law. Everybody knows on the Supreme Court, everyone knows in Congress paying attention to issues, that what Obama did there was no basis for doing. and everyone knew it was part of the larger Democrat effort to undermine the idea of citizenship in our country, to undermine the idea of sovereignty in our country, to move as quickly as the Democrats could while they had power, to grow the number of people in this country who simply have no idea what the idea of America is, no idea what the rule of law means, no idea what the Constitution means. The left is perpetually cultivating a growing percentage of Americans who simply will vote with them on everything. And the left is endlessly cultivating people who will stick with the left because the left tells them what they want to hear, promises them things. Oh, sure, you want citizenship? Okay. We'll ignore the law. We'll ignore the Constitution. We'll give you a path to citizenship. Look at those mean Republicans. Just because you entered America illegally and had no right to be here, why would they be picking on you for that? My point is, the Obama administration worked very hard for 8 years in a whole host of ways to undermine the idea of America, the identity of America, the concept of the rule of law, the concept of sovereignty, the concept of citizenship. This was just one little piece of the Democrat effort, along with abandoning the border, along with allowing hordes of people to cross the border, along with creating sanctuary cities, along with blurring the lines between citizenship and non-citizenship, along with cultivating in a variety of places around this country the right of people who are not legally here to vote. Numerous Democrat-run jurisdictions permitting the idea of voting, along with efforts on the American left to transform the illegal population in America, and the numbers range wildly between 12 to 15 million to 30 million, 35 million, however many. In this great land, there are literally millions and millions and millions of people who have no legal right to be here, and they are just a holding tank. They're in a holding tank the Democrats have created until they have power. When they have the presidency, the Senate, and the House, they will make them all citizens. And it's not because the Democrats are nice people. It's not because they are generous. It's because they see those people as a permanent future Democrat voting base. This is all that Obama was doing in putting that DACA thing into place, was just another little step along the way, cultivating sympathy and cultivating support among the illegal community in America. This is what Obama was doing. This is why conservatives are so distraught with Justice Roberts. He may eventually, be forced to vote and follow the law, although I don't know. I was going to go into a longer thing today about Justice Roberts, but I think I'm going to wrap up the first 5 and say, many, many times in recent years, in recent years, Justice John Roberts, who is our Chief Justice, has simply abandoned the rule of law, abandoned the assumption that his job is to follow the law, and gone along with the trendy, popular thought of America, which is the leftist thought in America. It's easier to capitulate to the left than it is to stand up for what's right. It's easier to capitulate to the left on issue after issue than to stand up for America. But getting around to my theme for today's show, I had this idea, and it felt kind of just too harsh to say it, but the identity of America, the idea of America, the promise of America is slipping away. I hate to say those words, but the identity, the promise of America is slipping away. The Supreme Court's failure, even with an alleged majority of conservatives who commit to follow the Constitution, even the Supreme Court is part of this America slipping away, the rule of law slipping away, going to instead whatever is the most popular, trendy thing to do, which appears to be what is motivating Justice John Roberts. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. Okay, I want to hit some numerous stories today. I'm always really, really ready to roll when the show comes around on Monday. I kind of miss talking to you all weekend. So I want to tell you, first of all, that we had a great adventure. My husband and I had a great adventure on Friday. We went to, now Friday was Juneteenth. It is the holiday Juneteenth, which is a celebration of when former slaves in Texas actually finally got word that President Lincoln, Republican President Lincoln, had issued the Emancipation Proclamation and that slaves were freed. Obviously, no internet then, no telephones, there's just no way to get the message instantly. But Juneteenth celebrates when former slaves in Texas learned that they were freed. And so Juneteenth is a holiday. What we did on Friday, on Juneteenth here in Texas, we went to the world premiere of an incredibly wonderful movie, and it's called Uncle Tom. Now, you know, the expression Uncle Tom is a derogatory expression. It's used by liberals and leftists to mock black Americans who they don't perceive to be black enough, or who don't follow left-wing protocol, who won't do what the left tells them what they have to do, who won't say what the left wants them to say. So Uncle Tom, this was a world premiere film, a documentary, a stellar, fabulous, great documentary. And what we were able to do, not just that we had the world premiere here in Dallas, which is so great, but actually the people involved making the film were there. So we had the incomparable Larry Elder, a black conservative pundit, been active in speaking the conservative message to the black community for decades. This is really his film. He was there. Actually, the filmmaker, the director of the film, Justin Malone, was there. But there were just, Herman Cain, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Pastor Stephen Broden, pretty much, Brandon Tatum, pretty much all the characters in this who took part in this documentary were there. So it's just enormously exciting, very exciting evening. They did the presentation. I think it's like an hour and 38 minutes film. And then they got up on stage. They actually had Larry Elder and the filmmaker, this young guy, by the way, the young filmmaker, Justin Malone, numerous other just luminaries in the black conservative movement were all there, and all speaking about making the film. The gist of the film is black conservatives trying to explain to America, number one, why they are conservative. Number two, the battles they face. Wasn't whining and crying, but it was just talking about when you are a black American and you realize that the Democrat Party is just using black Americans to hold on to power, when you realize that the values of the Democrat Party do not support, you don't agree with them, and you make a decision as a black American to become a black Republican American, and especially if you're outspoken in your conservatism, you are the subject of ridicule, hatred, disdain, mockery. We've talked about this many times on this show, but the film was just a kind of running commentary by many of the people in the film, talking about their life experiences. I have Matt the Wonderful. I have just a quick preview. This, I think, a 30-second preview of the film that we got to see the world premiere here in Dallas. So here you go. Matt the Wonderful has this clip.
Of the Democratic Party.
The party of slavery.
The history of the Democratic Party.
Jim Crow laws.
They're erasing all of the history of this country.
They want to cover up history.
The real history, not the revisionist history.
If you are educated,
Black people have been taught
a narrative that has been created.
You're actually miseducated.
And that's when I realized I've been lied to.
I had been misled.
It unraveled everything that I knew to be true.
You can go to the website. Let me tell you what it is. It's it's on our website. If you go to AmericaCanWeTalk.org, on the homepage under shows, drop down list of links, you will see that I put a link to that little teaser clip, 30-second clip. I also put a link to the actual website where you can buy the movie. I actually bought the movie, so I have electronically. I also bought the video. We're going to hold a showing in our home. But part of why I want to talk about this today, besides it was just so inspiring, it was such an inspiring evening, I really want to commend and talk about the bravery of black conservatives in this country and what they have faced for decades at the hands of the white liberals who claim they're the ones speaking up for black America. Stop and think about the absurdity of that. It is often the caustic, just nasty hatred of liberals, white liberals, who just are talking about and talking to and commenting about black conservatives as if they are the most vile, evil people. And you hear the lament, the hatred in the tone used in the discussion of black conservative heroes like Larry Elder. Certainly you saw Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, the way often the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has spoken about, Herman Cain. And this movie was poignant. It wasn't a story. It was a series of interviews, and they would flashbacks and describing history. And I mean, it was tremendously moving. I cannot urge you strongly enough to get it. But I also urge you to think about this. We are in this country under direct assault by BLM. And I'm going to get to my next segment. I'm going to talk about the difference between BLM, which is the abbreviation for Black Lives Matter, but BLM, the Marxist movement, and the actual reality that Black lives and all lives, of course, matter. BLM is a Marxist movement. They are engaged, not just, when I say Marxist, I don't just mean the technical definition where you have to define the difference between Marxism and socialism and communism and collectivism, because the left tries to get you all tangled up in parsing those little distinctions between those words. But what the left has done in this country, what the BLM movement is, what Antifa is, forget all their determination to parse and then criticize because you didn't precisely use the right term. They're about taking away your freedom. They're about taking control of America. They're about taking away your liberty, your freedom to speak what you believe in, your freedom to live as you choose. The radical left, the Marxist left, is what BLM is. We can get more into that in a moment. But I want to wrap up this segment about talking about this movie, this amazing Uncle Tom movie. In fact, there's a great link on our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links. You can read about the making of this film. You can read about the people involved, because there are numerous Black conservatives. Some apparently have been either doing radio shows or been spokespersons. I hadn't even heard of them before, but there are many in them. And what you really get from them as you listen to them speak, and then of all the great thing to get to hear them speak in person, what you realize, there's a genuineness of conviction. They don't have a motive. They don't have an agenda to take over the world. They have nothing but their purest thought that as they study, one person talked movie about it. I actually sat down and read the Democrat Party platform and the Republican Party platform. And I realized I don't believe in anything the Democrats believe in. This is true for many Americans. There is tremendous pressure in this country to submit to the radical left in this country. There's tremendous pressure to silence conservatives, certainly to silence Black conservatives who dare to speak up. And these people were able to share their life stories with people in their families, commentary from their families about, how everyone knows that Blacks growing up are taught you must vote Democrat, and how hard it is. And what the thing is that they're doing, they're standing up for what they believe in. They're thinking for themselves. They're standing up for the Republican Party's values. And I'm not saying every Republican is perfect, far from it. But the party's values, Republican Party values, conservative values, these are the same values as the founding of our country. The Republican Party values, again, not perfect. I can't defend every Republican in this country or every Republican elected official, but the values, the ideas of the Republican Party are the same as the values of the founding idea of America. And these people, these brave people who've been speaking up in the Black conservative circles for decades, are brave enough to say what they're saying, even in the face of being criticized not just by maybe their immediate family, but by everyone in our culture, by media, by Hollywood, by all sorts of people in journalism, in movies. Anyone who's a Black conservative is mocked and ridiculed, and these people made a movie called Uncle Tom to talk about the idea that it's time for more Americans, especially Black Americans, to re-examine their political affiliation, re-examine their thinking about why they vote the way they do, re-examine the behavior, the conduct, the values and ideas of the two parties, and recognize that the idea that they have been corralled into, arm twisted into, identified, siloed into, if you're Black, you must be a Democrat, is not good enough anymore. Oh, Candace Owens, she was brilliant. Candace Owens had many brilliant comments in that movie too. So can't urge you strongly enough to watch it, and follow with a commentary about it. Just a great and obviously very, very exciting evening. And it segues well into my next topic I want to talk about, which is I'm calling this the Marxist BLM versus the Black Lives Matter concept. And the BLM is the Black Lives Matter group that exists in America, that is leading these protests around the country. And I want to start with something. Before I get to BLM, I wanted to ask Matt the Wonderful to play something. I think this was clip 2, but I've lost track of the numbers, Matt. But it's the one with Edward Griffin This is a guy who's doing commentary. You can see from the black and white film set and just the whole way it looks that this is several decades old. But this is this journalist, Edward Griffin, speaking about what he discovered in diving into to understand the Communist Party in America in the 1920s. And here he is, Edward Griffin.
As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart.
Okay, so this was just a fabulous thing, and what he's getting at, this idea is getting at here is the communists themselves in the 1920s in America. Actually, Matt, is that the whole clip? Matt?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, because I didn't send him, then I cut off a portion I wanted to have him play, but anyway, I'll just tell you the rest of it. So this Griffin guy dug in 1920s what the Communist Party actually was saying was the idea that you can divide America. And he talked about, I'm so sorry I cut off too much of that clip, but he talked about how the communists decided you need to infiltrate the black community, you need to infiltrate the white community, you need to endlessly attempt to foment division. You have to try to foment division, and the way to do that is to use race. The Communist Party recognizes in America as early as 1920, we can use the racial issue to divide America. He also talked about a book that was written, and this is the one part I was really hoping we would get to. We didn't, I guess I cut off that clip, unfortunately. But there was a book written by a guy who was talking about the idea that he had a black man, he had joined the Communist Party because he thought the communists were there to save his people, to help the blacks in America. And he became very, very immersed in the Communist Party. He within America, rose in the ranks. This is a black American guy, and who realized that the actual, the party, the Communist Party he was heavily immersed in, was just using him. To get to the absolute communist takeover of our country, the destruction of all that is good about America, the destruction of the freedom of America, the destruction of free markets. The Communist Party was using race as an issue. And so thankfully, this guy realized this, and this was supposed to be in this clip, but this black American wrote this book, and now it's going to bug the daylights. I'll bring it for you tomorrow, but it was like class communism, and anyway, it's so disappointing because I thought I had this clip. But anyway, it was a black man who wrote this book, and that's this Griffin guy went on to talk about the idea that the book was written by this guy who spent the rest of his life, he withdrew from the Communist Party, and he went around the country talking about to his fellow black Americans, do not buy into communism. They're just using you. Now, for many decades, most Americans knew that communism was unacceptable, inconsistent with the idea of America, was simply not going to be, it was just going to ruin our whole country, ruin our prosperity, ruin our freedom, ruin our opportunity. But we're back now, here we are in 2020, and we have still that same communist, Marxist, leftist element at work inside what we now know as Black Lives Matter. And the next clip is for Matt to show you, to play for you. There is a woman who was one of the Black Lives Matter founders, and she talks about in her life why she came around to what she recognized, what motivated her to form Black Lives Matter.
After the 2012 killing of Trayvon Martin, 3 black women, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and our guest this segment, Patrisse Cullors, formed what has since become the global phenomenon of Black Lives Matter. So Patrisse, for those who may have just been introduced to you in a most direct way at the Netroots conference intervention you conducted, please help them and us see past what appears, from my point of view, to have been a tremendous amount of appropriation and suppression of you, Opal and Alicia as founders, and the particular brand of radical black gender and sexuality politics you all work with. So if you would, please summarize for us how you see the origins, politics, and purpose of Black Lives Matter. As you are advanced in your own organization, as you all are headed to Cleveland to participate in this Black Lives Movement conference, how do you respond to that particular critique? Again, a loving critique from an elder of the struggle that some others share, that I've even shared as well, to be frank, as a concern about, in part because of the co-optation and the appropriation, that a more clear ideological structuring might be of some value here. But how do you respond to those kinds of, again, loving criticisms?
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
Okay, trained Marxist. And I just want to say, I want to make this really clear what I'm trying to get at today, because it's bigger than just, bigger than just in the last month or so, we've had a lot of violence out of the Black Lives Matter movement and Antifa, and they have locked arms, locked elbows together in this enormous disruption we're watching. But they're going back to what the communists had to say in 1920s, going back to the recognition that the communists could divide America by race, by using race as a wedge issue to turn Americans against each other, to make them become suspicious of each other. This is what, this idea of the communists using it is what we're seeing being played out today in the radicalness of the Black Lives Matter organization. That woman, just one of them, there's two of the three founders are similar, she says, Marxist in their mindset. And I want to dig in this idea of Marxism. It's not, they're not saying in the Black Lives Matter movement, they're obviously not standing up and saying we want to have the government ownership of all materials, government ownership of all means of production, and we want the communists to take over America. They're smart enough not to say that. They're smart enough to not say that. What they are saying, though, is because of what they are portraying as a massively racist country, with just racism bursting out all over the place in this country, they are saying that in order to remedy that, every change they want must be made. Everybody in America must salute to the agenda of the BLM organization, because they are speaking up against repression, and so therefore every change they demand, everyone must agree with. And so America, when I told you at the start of the show, I had this thought about just America slipping away. We have so much of America surrendering to the radical demands of these radical leftists because race is being used as an issue, and nobody in this planet Earth wants to be called a racist. Nobody wants to have that suspicion cast on them. No one wants that label on them. So organization after organization, governmental organizations, local town councils, businesses, everyone seems to be surrendering to the BLM Marxist agenda. And when I say Marxist agenda, I want to run through some examples of that. For example, we had in a show last week, Brandon Tatum, talking about former police officer from Phoenix, former Democrat, who founded the Blexit movement, co-founded it along with Candace Owens. He's talking about, 99% of police officers in America are not racist. They don't think about race. They don't function. They just do their job. But we're supposed to all agree in this country that there is a radical problem with racism in the police departments in this country, institutional racism, and that is just pervasive. Criminal justice system has institutional racism baked into it. So all of this is being drawn, that picture is being drawn for the American people, and the question being posed to everyone is, will you take the side of Black Lives Matter, or are you a racist? Will you sign on to the Marxist BLM agenda, or are you a racist? And too many people are just going, I'll surrender, I'll surrender. I'm going to give you some examples. You remember we talked about the shooting in Atlanta, the police-involved shooting in the Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta. Rayshard Brooks, killed by a black man killed by a white Atlanta police officer. That was one example. Brandon Tatum walked us through it. Numerous other police authorities have walked the American people through it and said that officer had no choice. When you have a man turning and aiming your, even though it wasn't a gun, it wasn't a firearm, it was a taser. Once you're going to let a man who's been strong enough to overpower 2 police officers and who's going to shoot the taser at you, you don't have to let him do that. You don't know what you're going to do. So back to that point. So that whole shooting happened. There's been criminal charges filed, unjustified in the view of many, many people. But in Atlanta, after this Rayshard Brooks shooting, the police officers arrested, charged with murder in record time. I mean, just barely time to even review the facts. And the DA couldn't just spew out the murder charges fast enough. But his stepmother, the police officer involved in that shooting, his stepmother, who happens to work in HR in some company in Atlanta, was fired. Fired by a company. The woman who's the stepmother of the police officer, fired by a company because they said, other people in our workforce are no longer comfortable working around you. Other people aren't really comfortable working near you anymore. So, we got to let you go. So you have businesses capitulating on all sorts of pressure, whatever BLM says we're going to do, whatever the Marxists say we're going to do. So you had that instance. You have a professor at UCLA under suspension because he declined the request of black students at UCLA to get to waive all final exams due to racial injustice and due to the riots in this country. And he said, no, we're having final exams. Everybody else has an exam, you get an exam. And that professor is now in trouble with UCLA. Another example, this article, in fact, I think we put up on our website, in America, in some public school in America, a public school, held a workshop for elementary age kids to explain to them that the police are racist. So what are you supposed to do when you're the parent in that school? You're supposed to say, well, I guess we're just going to have to give in and everyone agrees police are racist because you can't argue, you can't speak up. This Marxism idea I'm getting at people, and I have one more story I want to get to today, but I'm going to have to wrap this up for today. But I want to get at this idea, we're going to explore it more and more. Marxism, the economic theory, this whole concept of owning means of production, that's one thing. But the concept of Marxism is a much bigger thought. People use cultural Marxism as one expression, political Marxism, legal Marxism. It is the entire uprooting of the concept of America, the idea of the freedom of the individual, of the rule of law in this country, of the rule of law that applies to everyone equally, that we have a government that lives, that's entire purpose is to protect the governed, protect the people, that the government has power because of the consent of the governed. All of those foundational ideas of America are under assault from the radical left, under assault from Marxism. BLM is just one avenue to do it. Antifa is another avenue to do it. The people trying to silence anyone who dares speak up are silenced. This Marxism idea, which is just astonishingly taken hold in our country, is the idea that whatever the leftists want the country to think on any issue, wherever the leftists are pushing, what they want you to see truth is what you must see as true. And you may not speak up, you may not counter, you may not even have the right to have the debate, because the Marxists who've now taken over the Democrat Party and BLM and Antifa are all banding together to silence and crush the idea of America. And this is why I said at the start of the show today, I said I feel like the America of the founding, the freedom of America is slipping away, because we've barely found any strength in our country yet to stand up against the Marxists who are literally burning our cities, who've taken over. We talked about that several times recently in Seattle, the Chaz area, where they still don't have the local authorities willing to be the grown-ups in the room and insist we actually have a country and a state and cities and police and a rule of law, and it applies to everyone. The Marxists are winning on the left. And this is a really important concept. It's not just that the Marxists are winning in Seattle. The Marxists are winning in the conversation in our country, in the American political conversation. The Marxists are winning the argument that they will dictate what must be said. They have decided all police are racist, even though that is preposterous. In fact, in Atlanta, it's something near half of the officers are black in Atlanta. And yet, in Atlanta, one example recently, which appears to be the justified shooting, unfortunate but justified shooting, Rayshard Brooks, is now another one of the litany of names they add to the list to point out that police are racist, and no one's allowed to counter that. Parents have to tolerate their kids being taught that in public school. Professors cannot impose the same rules on everyone. Say, yeah, actually, you know, we're going to have exams on schedule, because that's what we do in our country. We have exams. Everyone knows exam season's coming, but you're not allowed to do that. I mean, now the UCLA professor is being questioned for saying that he does not think that that they ought to have an extension or abandon exams in response to the racial unrest. I mean, I have story after story after story, but the idea that a business will stand up and say, you know, yeah, we're not going to permit, we're not going to have this woman, this stepmother, she can't even work here anymore because her son was arrested and charged in a shooting for which the stepmother clearly had nothing to do with it. I'm getting at the idea, and I want you to keep on thinking about it, and we're going to keep on talking about it. We can't surrender. We can't surrender the rationality of Western civilization, the rightness of political conversation, the idea of America, the rule of law in America, the idea that we are going to have a rule of law that applies to everyone. We cannot surrender that because the Marxist movement in this country has grown so strong. I don't even think they're very big, to be clear. I'm not saying that half the country is Marxist. I'm saying whatever you want to call, term you want to use, socialist, Marxist, collectivist, leftist, communist, whatever term it is really not a huge portion of our country. But it is a vocal, it is a radical, it is a bullying, it is a mindset that's taken hold that says we're going to get everything we want. You're going to do exactly what we say, and everyone's going to shut down. And so back to my mention earlier about the Uncle Tom movie. The people in that movie have put up with the bullying of the leftists in this country for decades. Not just Larry Elder, but Lieutenant Colonel Alan West and Herman Cain. And literally there were a dozen or more stellar people in that movie, all talking about how much they've had to put up with, how much grief from their families, their friends, Hollywood, journalism, everywhere for saying, I am black, I am conservative, I'm Republican. If they can stand up to that pressure and make that film at this time, America can learn something from them. We have to be the ones standing up. We have to be the ones saying, we're not going to let the radical bullying left steamroll freedom in America, which is exactly the path they are on. I have one more quick story, and I know we're about out of time here today. One more quick story I want to get to very briefly. I sent Matt the wonderful clip on this too, but this is not related to our issue today of race, but it is related to the astonishing audacity of the American left, the sense of emboldened self-righteousness. We decide what's true, we decide what can be said, we decide who can speak and who must shut up, and everyone in the country must agree. We have a bullying American radical left that is trying to say no one speaks anything, no opinions allowed except those approved by the radical left, and it's even made its way into the higher echelons of a Silicon Valley company called eBay. You all know what eBay is. You can go on there and buy and sell stuff. eBay, most amazing story, 6 executives from eBay were indicted for what they did to a couple in Massachusetts. Some little, and they keep being called middle-aged couple, put up a website and complained about whatever it is eBay did they didn't like. So this couple puts up a website to complain about eBay. I mean, it had other things on it too, I think, but they complained about eBay. I want you to hear what these executives, these are not like two, cocaine addicts in a parking lot somewhere thinking up a crazy plot. These are executives at eBay, what they did to this couple, and it is the same attitude. It's the same attitude of the left that says no one is allowed to have an opinion we don't agree with. No one's allowed to challenge us. No one's allowed to criticize us. Listen to what the Department of Justice had to indict 6 officials from eBay for what they did to this one couple for putting up a website they didn't like.
Addressing federal cyber-stalking charges against 6 individuals. Let's listen in.
Of harassment and intimidation against a middle-aged couple living in Natick, Massachusetts. That couple published an online newsletter that reviewed and was sometimes critical of eBay and other e-commerce companies. Jim Baugh, eBay's former senior director of safety and security, is being sought by federal agents in California, while David Harville, eBay's former director of global resiliency, was arrested this morning in New York City. They were charged with conspiracy to commit cyberstalking and conspiracy to tamper with an investigation. 4 other co-conspirators, all of whom worked at eBay, were also charged with the same crimes: Stephanie Pop, Stephanie Stockwell, Veronica Zay, and Brian Gilbert, who notably is a former police captain with the Santa Clara, California Police Department. The complaint alleges that the victims were targeted because eBay executives were unhappy with the coverage of eBay on the couple's website. To be clear, based on the complaint unsealed today, eBay executives were not merely unhappy with the victims' coverage, they were enraged. One of those executives texted that he wanted to, quote, crush this lady, unquote, referring to the woman in the couple who ran the site, and another told Baugh, his subordinate, to, quote, take her down, unquote. The result, as alleged in the complaint, was a systematic campaign fueled by the resources of a Fortune 500 company to emotionally and psychologically terrorize this middle-aged couple in Natick with the goal of deterring them from writing bad things online about eBay. The harassment scheme had 3 phases: sending disturbing deliveries to the couple's home in Natick day and night, sending the couple anonymous, threatening messages online, and actual physical surveillance in the Boston area. Starting in August 2019, Baugh directed Pop and Zay and others to set up anonymous email accounts, cell phones, and internet connections, and use them to send harassing and disturbing deliveries to the victim's home, all paid for with prepaid debit cards. These deliveries included fly larvae and live spiders, a box of live cockroaches, a sympathy wreath on the occasion of the death of a loved one, a book of advice on how to survive the death of a spouse, pornography mailed to their next-door neighbors but in the couple's names, a Halloween mask featuring the face of a bloody pig, and a pig fetus, which was ordered, but after an inquiry by the supplier, thankfully was never sent.
Folks, can you imagine? Again, this was not conduct thought up by 2 drugged out, cocaine addicts in a parking lot someplace. These are actual executives, 6 of them at least, indicted at eBay for torturing, sending boxes of live spiders, sending boxes of live cockroaches to some couple in Massachusetts who put in an online newsletter criticism of eBay. And obviously, I'm not saying this kind of conduct happens every day in every left-wing company, but it is a Silicon Valley attitude, a Silicon Valley where all big social media lives, where all the, the giants of the industry of social media live. And the attitude is nobody crosses us. We decide what can be said. And this couple were literally harassed, stalked, sending pornography to their neighbors, putting their name on it. I mean, I just, I hadn't even heard this story until a couple days ago. And I'm so blown away by it. I'm grateful that we actually had in this country, at least had the Department of Justice look into it, investigate, and go ahead and indict these people at eBay. But can you imagine the level? Just think about, you may think on the way home from work one day, man, I really can't stand that customer, my boss, our competitor. I'd love to sometime to, throw a rotten tomato or something. You may think something like that, have one-time thought like that, I can't stand that guy or that company. But this went on for months. Orchestrated, fake email accounts, items purchased with disposable, so you couldn't trace it. I mean, it was a project just to take down a couple who dared to criticize eBay. And I again, it's truly unique. It's grotesque, but it is also it's emblematic of how just the ego, the smugness, the self-righteousness, the attitude of the leftists in this country are just, nobody challenges us. I mean, this is eBay executives. It wasn't two goofballs in the mailroom. Executives, and I'm going to close out the show. I actually have a touch back with a couple of quick points before I get to why it matters to you about the show today. Fortunately, number one, someone texted me to say the Atlanta Police Department, which is being accused of being racist because of the death of Rayshard Brooks, is 58% black. And somehow we can keep up this racist, police are racist thing against the Atlanta police, and no one ever says, well, how could that be? Or, I mean, what about the 58% who are black? Where do they fit in your calculation? Next thing is the book I meant to have in the clip you heard earlier. I wanted to mention the book because I'm actually going to order it. It's a book called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. The author was the black gentleman who was a young man, joined the Communist Party of America because he thought the communists were going to save America and bring justice to the black community. So he rose up in the ranks of the Communist Party, and then he realized the Communist Party, the leftists, were just using race as a wedge issue, using him, using black America, using race as a wedge issue to ultimately do what they always wanted to do, which was to bring communism to America. So the book is called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. The author is Manning Johnson. I'm pretty sure he's deceased. I'm going to look it up. But anyway, Manning Johnson. These stories are important to understand because we're looking at stories today like the Black Lives Matter founder is acknowledging she's a trained Marxist, and yet we still want to, we're still very, very on eggshells, tiptoeing on eggshells, trying to talk about these very challenging issues. But we have to be able to call out when leftists in this country, communists, Marxists, leftists, whatever you want to call them, are using race to divide America, and their goal is not in the slightest to help lift black Americans out of poverty. It's not in the slightest to help anything with race relations. It is to harm race relations, is to worsen race relations, all for the goal of bringing Marxist collectivist control to this country. We can think, well, that would never happen here. This is America. People, we're under siege in this country right now. What we are watching in this country, the violence in the city streets, the just horrific destruction of property, police standing back, letting it happen, Democrat politicians completely mute and silent. No one on their side, no one on the left will even condemn the destruction of property, the killing of police officers, the burning of people's homes, the arson, destroying, and the theft of property, and the Democrat Party is mute. The Democrat Party is too wrapped up with, intermingled with, the radical Marxist collectivist left. They can't say a word. They can't condemn criminal conduct. They cannot defend. They cannot even in the slightest critique it. And so we have to ask ourselves, do you recognize America itself, the idea is under assault from the left? It's under assault from the Marxists, the people we call them Antifas, or they're the anti-fascists, they're the most fascist organization imaginable. They have roots in evil fascism and in communism. And those entities are growing. They get media attention. They get no criticism from the media. They get no criticism from Democrat officials, no criticism from any Democrat, House member, senator, anywhere. And we all just want to sit back and say, well, I don't want to be the one to criticize because then the mob, the Democrat mob, will come after me next. They'll call me names. They'll mock me. They'll attack me. Just like those lunatics running eBay did to that poor couple in Massachusetts. People see stories like this. They see the way that the leftist mob in this country attacks anyone who speaks up. And too many people decide, I don't want to speak. I think I'd rather be silent. I'm just going to hold back. I don't want to really say anything because I don't want to be the next victim. People, that whole concept about, the alligator, you can duck and hide. He's still going to eat you. He might eat you last, but he is going to eat you. what the left has become in this country. We are in the midst in 2020 of a battle for the heart and soul of America, for the identity of America, for the concept of a country rooted in freedom, rooted in the ideas of the Declaration and the Constitution that have given the most prosperity, abundance, opportunity, the comforts of life to people of every race, ethnicity, and national origin. Can we always do better? Yes. Are we always trying to improve our police departments, our rules, our conduct, our training? Yes. We're always working to make a more perfect union. But the left is not about fixing America. They're not about making a more perfect union. They're about destroying America. And enough Americans better wake up and realize it before it is too late, because that is what we are watching on the streets of America in this time today. I'm a little bit past my ending time for my show today, so I do need to turn to the stories that we talked about today and why they matter to you. We first talked about in the very beginning of our show today, we talked about the DACA, the Supreme Court decision, Justice Roberts. DACA was never a law passed by Congress. It was an Obama suggestion, but Obama himself acknowledged he had no constitutional authority to make or enforce, because Congress has sole authority over immigration laws. Yet, Chief Justice John Roberts sidestepped the illegality of Obama's DACA program and authored an opinion effectively saying left-wing Obama can start an illegal program, but Trump can't end it, without a better explanation of why, without playing, Simon Says and, dot your I's and cross your T's. This is not legal reasoning. It's using the Supreme Court to sustain leftist open borders, diluted citizenship policies. John Roberts has disgraced himself, the legal profession, and the Supreme Court. Decisions are transparently political with outcome-driven reasoning. They have no anchoring in law, except insofar as they proclaim that whatever we say is the law. On Uncle Tom's Juneteenth celebration, fabulous new film by black filmmakers, by just a chorus of black conservatives trying to speak up about the importance of conservative ideas that they've embraced for decades. Check out the new Uncle Tom documentary at uncletom.com. Appearances by guests who've been on my show: Alan West, Candace Owens, Brandon Tatum, Pastor Stephen Broden. Outspoken conservative black men and women are among America's best and bravest. They stand up to outrageous vilification of their character by black and white leftists for no reason except they don't toe the leftist line. The contrast with craven corporate leaders who fire the stepmom of the Atlanta cop for no reason but to run from and appease a possible Twitter mob is stunning. The rescue of America may depend a great deal on black conservatives. In fact, that's one of the Candace Owens lines. It's black Americans who are going to save this country from the left, says Candace Owens quite often. Okay, Marxism and Black Lives Matter versus Marxist BLM versus Black Lives Matter. Communists in the 1920s zeroed in on race relations as the weak point to be leveraged in their efforts to take down America. BLM spokeswoman, founder, "We are trained Marxists," is the tell. BLM is not about racial equality or eliminating racism. BLM supports abortion, Planned Parenthood, which was founded by Margaret Sanger, a quintessential white supremacist racist. BLM supports the abolition of free markets because, say they, free markets are racist, despite that free markets have produced the most prosperity for every person of every race, ethnicity, and national origin since time began. Racism as a reason to get rid of free markets is nonsensical, but it exemplifies communism's 100-year determination to use race to bring down America. BLM supports the queering of America. This is not a concern of black Americans. It's communism's desire to kill the nuclear family. Americans must see through the BLM facade. It is hardcore Marxism. And eBay, Silicon Valley sends spiders. This was a truly underreported story. Department of Justice arrests and indicts 6 senior eBay executives who engaged in wild, cruel, depraved uses of cyber technology to harass, intimidate, frighten, and financially destroy a Massachusetts couple that published commentary critical of eBay. This is another example of the totalitarian, amoral mindset of the Silicon Valley. Google, Facebook, Twitter, eBay, none comprehend conservatism, but they all hate it. They're all determined to use technology, sophistication to stifle, smother, silence, and destroy any dissent from the leftist omnipotence worldview. Americans, Republicans are too cowardly to fight or even resist. America needs new conservative leaders. Donald Trump does fight, and I'm closing the show today. I'll tell you something. Just someone texted me. Fox just announced that the Trump rally on Saturday night, first rally he's had since the whole shutdown thing, his rally gave Fox News the largest Saturday night history audience in its history. And on that note, my friends, this is America Can We Talk. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I do this show Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time. And I do it because I love this precious country. I do it to speak up for the ideas of America's founding. I do it to speak up for America. And I hope you'll tune in every time, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, and that you'll speak up for America, because we need all patriots on deck this election season, because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America, Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you